John,
Hey, how are you, buddy?
what's it been? A couple weeks?
It's
Everyone,
been
just
2 weeks.
to let you know, we haven't gone silent out of just pure laziness. We've had some technical and physical difficulties. John,
Yeah,
you survived. You're
physical difficulties, like the movie we're going to talk about today a little bit. I
yeah
thought I had a demon possess me.
yeah
With it came in the likeness of the flu,
yeah.
and it was one of those flus that just kicked my ass.
Oh yeah.
But I am back from the depths of phlegm and fever, and excited to be back and talking again. It really sucked being away for 2 weeks, so I just couldn't do anything. And I'm finally feeling like myself today for the first time in a long time. I
That's
feel
awesome.
human
You're
again.
you're you're back. You're back in the saddle. It's good to have you
Yes.
back.
Yep.
Now, it's as I look out my window here on a
Mhm.
nice freezing Chicago night,
Yeah.
it is snowing. And all I can think about is how excited that we are on this episode to talk about a feeling of being snowbound. And
Yep.
we're talking about The Shining.
Yeah.
Now, this movie, okay, John, you and I have this is our generation movie, right? I mean, we were a little young per se, but old enough to be at the theaters when out. So it
Mhm.
wasn't like let's say Jaws, where it was too young to almost remember,
Yeah.
right? At least for me, or The
Right.
Exorcist, which was I think I was 1 years old when that came out, or even Psycho. This is like the horror movie that traumatizes you because it's your earliest memories.
Mm. It's true. It was actually the first horror movie I remember seeing,
Yeah,
and the very first horror movie I ever saw in the theater. And mind you, I was like 9.
that's
But
crazy.
my father took me to see The Shining because he thought it'd be a good idea. Uh, and I won't go into great detail. It didn't traumatize me to what I would expect it should have traumatized
Yeah,
me. I don't know how my brain works, but uh, yeah, it was a movie that Scott, we talk, you and I talk about all the time, and you
yep,
recently, as why we're talking today, have brung up on how deconstructed and overanalyzed this film actually
yep,
is, which
yep.
is I literally had no idea until you told me about this, and then I spent a lot of time researching this. It's unbelievable. It's
Yep.
unbelievable. Unbelievable.
This, first of all, this is The Shining. Came out 1980.
Yeah.
Stanley Kubrick, starring Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, and this possibly, I would say, is one of the most over. And you said overanalyzed movies, and that's what we're here to talk about today. We want to. We're not going to go into like The Shining as a movie per se, but why are there so many theories? And just to tell you, Stanley Kubrick has a number of movies, right?
Mm.
Such as Eyes Wide Shut, you have Full Metal Jacket and The Clockwork Orange, and they haven't been analyzed to the extent of The
Mm.
Shining. So, what is it about this movie? I'll say, let me just say, the first notice I had of this was the documentary called Room 237,
Mm.
which is a full-on legit documentary. You can get on
Yep.
Amazon Prime and all your other platforms, and it goes into the mystery behind the one of the biggest conspiracy theories within The Shining, and it's actually quite convincing. And I don't know, John, if you've seen this
Yes, I did.
movie.
I actually watched it. I actually watched it the whole 2 hours and 37 minutes, whatever it was.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I actually watched it. What I found, and I was talking to Carla about this today because she's not a huge fan of The Shining,
yeah,
and she's more of a classic movie fan, like Psycho. She's a big Hitchcock
yeah,
fan, right? And
yeah,
I told her I'm not comparing Hitchcock to Kubrick. It's impossible.
yeah,
Hitchcock set the bar. Kubrick's very different. But
yeah,
what's I think is so fun about this topic
yeah,
is just when you go onto YouTube and just type in The Shining Explained and
yeah,
how many hundreds of
yeah.
videos pop up, it's completely entertaining. Like
It,
you can be entertained for hours
yeah,
as you watch through. Most of them are about a half hour,
yeah,
25 minutes.
yeah,
It's unbelievable and
yeah,
extremely entertaining. And as I watched through dozens of them, it was pretty. I mean, like some of it's like wasn't too far fetched, and then I did realize one thing is for certain: some people in this country have way too much freaking time on their hands because they are spending way too much time overanalyzing this movie. But it's so much fun to look at and to watch these different pieces that people make, and God bless them for doing it. I mean, they're very serious about it, and all due respect, it's just amazing.
Yeah, I think I couldn't believe, obviously, you'll have documentaries or behind the scenes about big movies, right? Most of them
Yeah.
have that. They warrant, people want to know more. But somehow with The Shining, it's touched upon this almost cult-like personality,
Mhm.
not in that people are trying to act out the scenes. It's all about what is going on in Kubrick's head. How can they decode all these Easter egg type hidden messages, conspiracy theories? And believe me, hey, it's a crazy world out there right now. And you'll hear conspiracy theories on just about everything, right? I mean, you had COVID, right? That's a whole conspiracy by the
Right.
Chinese
Right.
and Wuhan. And you'll hear about the Bill Gates's like vaccines. And
Mhm.
so it's kind of the ultimate time for people to talk about, let's say, conspiracy theories. But with The Shining, I guess, John, it'd be like, as I'm looking at your background, it would be like there's 5 or 50 things that you have strategically placed to send a
Yeah.
message to anyone watching Steph Nation
Right. And,
tonight.
and you're looking at all the books behind me.
Yeah.
This movie, every single frame of The Shining
Yeah.
has been deconstructed and
Yep.
analyzed to a
Yep.
point where you're right. Like there are documentaries where I think a lot of it is deliberately the misleading, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of it is
Yeah.
just overactive imagination.
Oh, yeah.
But funny things like the books that are in the movie, right? Like
Yeah.
Wendy, Shelley Duvall's character's reading
Yeah.
Catcher in the Rye. Is there
Yeah.
something about that? There's 42
Exactly.
cars in the parking lot.
Yeah.
The number 42 is on Danny's shirt.
Yep. Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
where are we going with that? This is my favorite one. This is my favorite one.
Yep.
I have to say it. Someone pointed this out, which I love this, but in this movie, as the titles are coming through in the beginning of the movie, the titles go up instead
Yep.
of down. And all the names of all the characters and the movie's title are all in the
Yep.
same size font.
Yep.
That was cool. I'm like, you know what?
But what's the
That's
conspiracy?
badass.
What is the
I don't see a
you
conspiracy.
gotta
I
you
just think
gotta
that
you gotta
I
start
just
something
think
there. What did it
I just think is
represent?
I just think it's badass. I'm like,
Okay.
Kubrick did that intentionally to
Yep.
do it. So like, he's bucked it when no, we're gonna push these things up. And The Shining is The Shining the movie title, or is it a character, or is it a
Yeah.
person? Right.
Well,
So yeah, you can think of conspiracies, but just little details like that
yeah.
that I love to learn about that were like, damn, that's a good idea. That's so
This
smart.
it is incredibly smart, and I think Kubrick is one of those directors that people get obsessed about him because his level of detail, all these famous stories about he does hundreds and hundreds of takes. He
Yeah.
exhausts the actors, and then we'll get this cut because they have nothing in them and just pure passion, and that's the cut he'll take. And we've seen that actually with Shelley Duvall in her
Yeah.
kind of post trauma
Yeah.
of filming for over a year, right?
Yeah.
And you can kind of tell the guy's a true perfectionist. But some of these theories, and we'll just say for our audience here. So here's some of the greatest hits based on our research. One, The Shining is about the Holocaust, right? You saw the 42. You saw all these kind of clues about 1942, which is when that happened. Other theories, Indian or Native American genocide. Okay, now that the hotel was built, as according to the book and the movie, it was built over a Indian burial ground, which seems to happen in various other movies as well. World War II. Another one is that it was a whole. It was showing how we never landed on the moon. This whole hoax about the moon landing. Okay, that it was just that was one of my favorites. And then you get into all this, like, what did the actual hotel represent? And this is where it gets a little bit crazy. First of all, they said it represents it's actually an entity, right? I think you were saying, what is the Shining? What is this?
Right.
What is this whole hotel? And I thought that was, listen, when you're reading literature or not, you can always look at metaphors and what's the, the analogy, or what is it really supposed to mean? What's the literal sense or the figurative sense? And I think those are fairly common. I think you can look at Jack Torrance's condition as he was a messed up guy, and the house kind of took him under his wing, and that I thought was, kind of plausible, right? He seems like a little bit of a crazy guy at first, but what were your impressions about some of these videos and some of these
There's
theories?
so much.
Yeah, there's a ton. It's actually overwhelming.
I won't repeat most of what you just said was what I learned as well. I think there's this. I'm gonna make some quotes because I wrote some stuff down because it was really interesting. The ancient Indian burial ground. There was talk about the spiritual forces, America's ancient past. Right.
Yeah.
There's a scene where Jack is throwing a ball against the wall, and as a kid, I remember this scene. He's in this main great hall, and he's kind of snapping, right? Because he has like writer's block, and he's taking the tennis ball and he's throwing it against the wall and throwing it against the wall. But if you're not careful, I didn't notice this until someone pointed out, he's throwing the ball against a ancient Indian Native American mural.
Yeah.
So is he basically throwing it saying, is he doing it against Native American and the spirit within the hotel?
Yeah.
There was a quote that said, the indigenous optimistic spiritualism that undergirds the narrative. I just love that. Someone actually said that. I wrote it down because it was in captions. But there is this sense, couple other little ones. Stuart Ullman, who's the manager of the hotel. There's a lot of comparisons to him and JFK. He looks a lot like JFK, right? Very odd is that, when Jack gets to the hotel for the interview, he's reading a Playgirl magazine. Very weird. Also, the article in magazines about incest, which leads to this whole other topic I won't get into about his abusing of his son. Is that part of the thing as well? The Catcher in the Rye symbolism was another one. I think those were ones that popped up. I think, to me, also the lady in the bathroom. Scott and I were talking before we started the podcast. As a kid, when I saw this movie, I remember like the blood coming out of the elevator and rushing through the hallway. I thought that was kind of cool. Like, ooh, wow, it's like red Kool-Aid coming through. And there's a kid in the big wheel. But the thing that scared me the most was that scene in room 237 where Jack goes into the room and the attractive woman gets out of the bathtub and he's tempted and he kisses her. And then he looks in the mirror and she turns into this old, like decrepit woman. That scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. Like that freaked me out. Those little scenes, and what does that symbolize? What does that mean? There's all kinds of ways to dissect that room 237, the number 237. All those kinds of things. It's just at the end of the day, even that scene in room 237, I just gotta tell you, as from an art direction standpoint, one of the most beautiful scenes is that mint green bathroom. There's so many scenes in this movie that are visually stunning to look at from a cinematic standpoint that it always blows me away.
And for example, there's the green, then there's the green in the hallway, there's the green at the beginning. So all these clues, like for example,
and the color orange
that's
was shining, right? The color orange.
Exactly. And then when you have him in the kitchen, there's the Calumet Indian Native American brand. And so all these clues, and the bear, right? If you see Danny, there's the whole theme of the bear, which goes on this idea of sexual abuse. It is just every single topic you can find within this. And that's what I think is so funny, is that people go through it and they'll be like, okay, you see the painting on the wall. There is that painter. Okay, let's look at his history. Okay, now that's what this means. So it's this power of suggestion. It is
It
literally the
is.
imagination is going crazy. And I don't know if Kubrick today, if he would have sat back and just looked at it and go like, yeah, man, that's exactly what I wanted.
Or is he like, what is
Yeah.
wrong with
Or,
you
or,
people?
or one of
What
those
is
like,
wrong with you?
yeah. And that's what I think is so funny. It's like, oh yeah, we needed that painting and there was one just next door. So I
Well,
took it.
you know what
And,
there
and,
was
and
one
there's no
too,
big
Scott?
story behind it. Yeah.
There was one that I thought of you because this one came up a lot, which was the numerous references to classical works of mythology, right? Regarding Theseus and the
Yeah.
labyrinths of the Minotaur. And I thought,
Yeah.
I never even that never even I am not into Greek mythology or any kind of mythology,
Yeah.
but that came up again and again and again with the maze, and I'm like, oh my god, these people,
Yeah.
oh my
I mean,
god,
they're
they're
talking
out of
about the
control.
posters. Some of the
The
theories are
monarch,
like,
right? The
yeah,
poster in the back, right?
yeah,
Is that a minotaur? No, it's a dude skiing.
yeah.
It's a guy
Well,
skiing. It's
and
not a.
then, and so and I encourage anyone, first of all, if you haven't seen The Shining, you should, as a
Oh,
matter of cinematic history. It's
you should
absolutely
see it.
amazing. But I would say see it first and then see
Yeah.
these and just go on YouTube. You don't need to rent anything. You don't need to pay
No,
anything.
no.
There's so much on there. And that's what I almost want to talk to these people and saying, like, what is it? Now, there are some creators on there that have explained, for example, why I'm doing this video. And some of them said, and rightfully so, that this movie terrified me so much that I
Mm,
wanted to know more about it. It's almost like you want to understand the fear, you want to face the fear. And why is it so terrifying? And that's when it starts to border less on conspiracy theories or explanations and more Kubrick's style. But then you start
mhm.
to realize that his style includes a lot of layers. And I think that's what's so much fun about this movie. Just like certain novels, every time you read it, that you discover more. And I think that's
Yeah.
what is so interesting about The Shining is that you can watch it over and over again. You'll see minotaurs, right?
Yeah, you
You'll
will.
see,
I mean, all of a sudden, like you'll freeze it, and, like look in the background and go, "Oh, I didn't
yeah,
see that book. What
yeah,
does that book mean? Or what does that color mean?" It is. It becomes this like hunt for Easter eggs that maybe just
exactly.
totally in your brain,
Yeah,
but it does become something like that with this movie. It's I've never seen anything like with any other movie I've
yeah.
ever heard about or read about. This movie takes the cake with
It
all of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's when John and I were talking about The Shining. And we always knew this was something we wanted to talk about in terms of the paragon of the ultimate horror movie, right?
Mm.
But I think what was even more fascinating are these just rabbit holes that people have gone down. And it's almost laughable in some instances because, as we mentioned, they'll look at a plant and go, okay, see that plant? Let's look at the history of that plant. And then they'll tie it into
Right.
something. And you're like, okay,
Something. That
they're doing
plant killed a
graphs.
lot of Native Americans, and it was in the bar where Jack called it out. Yeah,
Exactly.
strange
But
things.
there's
Yeah.
certain things that when you do look at, they're actually pretty interesting. One of them was Stuart Ullman's, I think I said
Yeah.
Ullman's
Yep.
office. So what
Yes.
they said that if you look at the layout of the hotel, there's no way that his office you could have a window.
Right.
And so they put a window in there and like, okay, that doesn't make sense. What is that supposed to mean? Then there's theories about who Stuart Ullman is
Right.
and
Right.
JFK, or if he's a conduit. And it's just amazing to see the passion of these fans, super
Oh
fans,
my
if you
goodness.
will.
You mentioned like the window, right?
Yeah.
There was this whole other part I watched in one of the creators' documentary about on the floor of and the layout of their apartment or the room they lived in and how there was an extra door that wasn't supposed to be there. I mean,
Yep.
literally people like look at the will like find the layout of the hotel and like and that can't be right. There can't be another door because there's only one door. And like you said, that guy's office, it wouldn't be an office. It would be like there'd be nothing behind it. So there'd be no windows, but there was a
Yep.
window. It is it's just incredible. I think it's also a nod to the actors that were in this movie
Yeah.
that just did an amazing job
Yeah.
with this whole thing.
one other aspect we didn't talk about, but it's another huge rabbit hole, is the music and
Oh,
how
yeah.
the music, there are theories that it is played exactly
Yeah.
to the sequence of the acting, right? So there's all these kind of techniques when you have these type of surprises, and they even talk about like early Mickey Mouse movies where you have the sound, like if you're surprised, it'll go ah, and they actually, as Kubrick, I guess, went back to that old method, which some directors thought was kind of, I won't say cheesy, I don't know what the appropriate word is, but that was another aspect that is actually pretty interesting. Again, like any conspiracy theory or any theory, when you look
Yeah.
into it, you start to and create the answer. Like you'll justify,
Right.
oh yeah, yeah, he definitely meant that. And I thought the music part was
It
was
was. You
fascinating.
brought up a really good point because for me, the camera work and cinematography were
Yeah,
just outstanding in this movie. The
yeah,
use of the steady cam for the first time was amazing. But the sound, Scott, especially in that opening
yeah,
scene, for those who haven't seen it, when the movie opens up, there's these beautiful scenes that were shot from like obviously a helicopter because there was no drones back then,
yeah,
and they show this yellow car that the family's in or that Jack is in kind of driving through, and
yeah,
there's this music and this overlay of like screams and like weird moans. Like if you really pay attention, there's some weird stuff going on with the music and the sounds in this film that are just I just think subconsciously they affect and make it even more eerie than
yeah.
it actually is.
Oh yeah,
And you don't realize until you step back and go, why was that so scary? God, because that sound.
oh yeah,
You know, even like the things you don't hear when Jack, when he goes into the main room toward the end of the film, he goes to the bar and it's a flashback to the 30s, and everyone's like in their 30s attire, like back.
yeah.
But there's very little sound. It's all like very small, like
Yeah,
this weird little things like that. That it's genius.
yeah.
Really
They
smart.
create such a eerie, doom type feel. I thought the one where, I don't know if there's a theory on it, but when Scatman Carruthers is
Mm.
in his home and he
Oh
starts to
yeah,
shine with Danny, and you hear the
yeah,
beat, all you hear is that heartbeat. And it's just, it's very, very creepy. But I thought it just, as people analyze this movie, I find it almost like a club or a community that it's just fun. And I think I encourage anyone, after a while, the fear or that scare factor almost wears off, and it's almost academic. You're looking
mm,
at anything you can get your eyes on and go, okay, why, what was that? Okay, there's a picture and it's two guys. Okay, what does that mean?
yeah,
And again, overanalyze to the hilt. But you start to see I think, as you said, John, that genius of Kubrick, that I would say there was some intent there. There's definitely some intention to create these Easter eggs,
sure.
this treasure hunt, if you will, for clues. And I gotta tell you, and to our audience here, if you haven't seen it, there is an alternate ending. Now, John, I don't know if you've heard about this.
Yes, yes, yep,
Uh, so the ending you see is where the camera zooms, they show Jack frozen, right? That classic scene, and then they zoom on a picture and it zoom, and then you see 1921 Overlook Hotel, and it's a guy who looks exactly like Jack Nicholson, back in the day, all shaven and in a
yeah,
tuxedo, and it leads to this kind of this mysterious ending. Well, that wasn't the original ending. The original ending was actually shown and released in New York and Los Angeles, and it got very bad reviews from the very limited showings. And it actually, this is going to be a spoiler, right? Here's a spoiler alert.
yep.
But you actually cannot find the actual footage. It's only some pictures and script that they've kept. So you'll have to reenact it in your head. But it's at the hospital. Stuart Ulm. This is after Jack dies and whatnot. And Stuart Ullman goes to the hospital to visit Danny and Wendy. And the very last scene is, as Stuart is leaving, he throws Danny the same tennis ball that
This
Jack
ball.
was playing with. So
Yep.
somehow that didn't do well. I think the ending, they thought it was over explanation and whatnot. And Kubrick wanted to create mystery. And so this adds a little bit of explanation of maybe why there were all these Easter eggs, because he wanted that power of mystery. And the mystery is you don't explain, right? So
Yeah, it's like I was telling Carla today. I said, we're not really. I said Scott brought up this great topic because she always asks me, "So what are you guys going to talk about today?"
yeah,
And I said, "The Shining." She's like, "Oh, The Shining." I'm like, "Oh, but not The Shining, the movie, like a review of it or why we think
yeah,
it's so good." But that is this very unique film
yeah,
that has this unique following behind it, where it's so much fun to watch the content that all these different people have created to talk about their explanation or a theory or whatever it might be, because it's really entertaining. Like Scott, like I said, I encourage our audience, you have to do, like, if
yeah,
most people have seen the film, if you haven't seen it, see the film first, but then go and just go into YouTube. And this content is really entertaining and it's really fun to look at,
yeah,
because it kind of takes the fear out of it, and you're kind of like, oh my god, that's really smart.
yeah,
It's like, it's really interesting. It's like
yeah,
decoding some things, and
exactly.
some of it you're like, okay, the stars on Danny's shirt are
Yeah,
inverted. I'm like, you got to
yeah, yeah.
kidding me. But it's entertaining.
It's so, I think that's what it is so fascinating, is the time spent. I mean, someone had to go
Oh my
through
goodness.
one of the best ones. It's the movie called I Scream, and it is over 2 hours analysis of all basically his one guy's interpretation of what The Shining means on many facets, including lighting, including the actually cinematography and music. But one of the things he does that is absolutely fascinating, and it reminded me of when Wizard of Oz and Dark Side of the Moon. If anyone's heard that, if you play Wizard of Oz and Dark Side of the Moon from beginning, they tie in. It's actually like synchronized, right? So as
Mm.
Dorothy's doing this, you'll hear a song from Pink Floyd. So it reminded me very, very much of this. But he said, when you play simultaneously The Shining and you play it from backwards, right? From end to start, they coincide. And he actually shows you what's happening. And so he overlays it. It's absolutely amazing. I got to tell you, like, you just can't believe someone actually did this. We'll send clips on our social media, but some of it
that
works, some
is
of it's a bit
hilarious.
forced. But you just got to
But
respect these guys that have done.
oh, it is amazing. And I mean, and they put in the time and the research, and they're very serious about it,
Yep,
because
yep,
I mean, let's face it, Kubrick is a very kind of polarizing character. I mean, there are
yep.
either you're a I'm a fan, but I'm not like a diehard fan of Kubrick. I didn't. Like Eyes Wide Shut, and I didn't really care for it. But Doctor Strangelove, great film,
Yeah.
right? He made some good movies, but the effort and time that goes into these this work and these people that go into these things, it's really. I mean, I don't know if they have jobs or if this is all they do for a living,
Yeah.
but I really appreciate them creating the content, because it is. I thank Scott for really bringing this topic up, because I would have never have thought of this, because I didn't know this whole genre or this whole community is a better
Well,
word for it. This whole
yeah.
community existed, and I'm we have to do, Scott. We have to dig into this more, and like, is there one for Jaws? Like, is there some
Well, no,
strange Jaws theories about, like, well, it's a white shark.
no,
Well, what does that
I
mean?
tell you what, I have done research. I think what it was this documentary which came out called Room 237. And
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
set off. And I think it's the ultimate, as you said, there's something about this movie. Again, you have many classic horror movies out there, and you don't even want to think of Shining as a horror movie in the same grouping, whatever. It's just it's this movie that has somehow captured the imagination to this nth degree. So that's what's really fascinating about it. I think when I saw it as a kid, I obviously I wasn't looking at it, but after watching Room 237. Then you start to get your mind going. And then I think that's what has set with social media, with YouTube. Everyone's looking, but somehow it is still going. Like there are still videos being uploaded. So I'm telling you guys,
Yeah.
watch it. We'd love to see your interpretation of what
It's
you think it's about.
it's unreal. But I guess at the end of the day, I mean, it's a testament to the movie,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the
Yeah.
movie is one of those classic movies that it stands the test of time.
Yeah.
Like it just stands the test of time. Everything about it, from the directing to the acting
Yeah.
to the cinematography and music, it's like any great film, or even a great horror film. It just
Exactly.
stands the test of time. And I always liked The Shining because it wasn't over the top like blood and guts.
Yeah.
It was more like, of like the Hitchcock style, where it was more implied. There's a few kind of gory
Yeah.
scenes, but it was more like thrilling and scary than it was like, I'm going to watch someone like get taken apart with a hacksaw.
Yeah. What I loved about this too was that when it came out, it was a dud. Right here, you have Stanley Kubrick. He's coming off
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
was it, Barton Lynch? I forgot the name of that movie, but he wanted to do something more commercial, right? A kind of a pop hit, and they spent over a year filming this under his crazy conditions of thousands and thousands of takes and perfection, right? Which nearly caused trauma to the actors. And it comes out, and it got nominated for a Razzie for Kubrick for worst director. And you had Jack Nicholson in it. You had these amazing actors, and Shelley Duvall was pretty big at the time.
Yeah.
And what I love about it, because it gives me hope, and anytime I do anything creative and it doesn't get accepted, is that somehow this movie over time just got bigger and bigger. And I love that, where it's like you watch it and you're like, yeah, it was all right. Then you watch it again, you're like, oh wow, that was good. So it really gives credit to all the pain and all those layers he put in. And now people are finally going, holy crap.
It's so similar to the movie Rad. It's so similar.
Yeah. Or kind of like White Chicks. It's kind of like White Chicks. You can keep watching it over and you're like,
I'm going to pass on White Chicks.
This is about the space station. This is not a movie about white chicks.
Yeah, it is one of those movies that you're right. And there are a lot of those. We've talked about a lot of those films that were commercial disasters, but after I mean, and you can go back to like the 30s and 40s films that were, I mean, even It's a Wonderful Life, for Pete's sakes, which is coming out now, was a total flop at the box office when it came out. And now is like, an epic movie. So I do love how The Shining is one of those that when it came out, it kind of went, critics poo-pooed it. But, later on now people look at it as probably like a case study for a lot of film schools.
That's it.
For a lot of reasons. So
what more in terms of, what do they say, accolades than people spending for free doing movies about their interpretation of a movie? Like, you can't get any more praise. So in any case, well, listen, everyone, thank you so much. It's been a while, John. It's good to be back.
I'm healthy. I have antibodies now. I'm good. I'm back. It's 68 degrees here in Vegas. Sorry, Scott, for the snow in Chicago. But it's good to be back. Get ourselves back on our regular cadence with some more ideas. We've got lots of ideas coming up. And our audience, if you have ideas, you have some thoughts on things we should talk about, let us know. We take everything into consideration.
Remember, all work, no play makes John a dull boy.
A very dull boy.
Everyone, have a great weekend and a great Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
And we'll see you soon.
Take care.
Yeah.